everybody, and welcome back to You Can't Win. This is Tom here, and I'm joined by Don, as usual. Today we're going to be talking to our friend Niko, who has been teaching English in China and has a few interesting stories about that. Welcome to the show, Niko.
Yeah, welcome.
Hey, thanks, guys. Good to be here.
So, how long have you been in China for at this point?
It's coming up on 2 years now. I came here in fall of 2019, originally from Toronto, and I've been staying here in Nanjing the whole time.
Mm-hmm. So, could you tell people maybe a bit about Nanjing? Like, it's like the historical southern capital, I guess, of China. I don't know. It's like a major city, though, right? It's like a very big city. So, yeah.
There's depending on how you put the boundaries, there's about 9 million people here. It's one of China's, I don't think it's a tier 0 city, which is just like Beijing and Shanghai. But it's like tier 1, so one of the bigger cities. Obviously, it's in the richer eastern part of China. It's on the Yangtze River, upstream from Shanghai, in its own province. It's the capital of Jiangsu province, which is, big, rich eastern province. And it's the southern capital. Like Beijing is north capital and Nanjing is south capital. The various different times have been used as capitals for different governments.
Sure. And so, I mean, because you've been there 2 years, I think people, obviously, you have been there through the whole pandemic, I guess. And
Yeah, good timing, buddy.
Honestly, that's been one of the craziest things. So when the virus first hit, I was in Australia for the spring holidays because, the sort of Christmas in China is Lunar New Year, Spring Festival. So late January of, I guess it was 2020, I was in Australia hanging out with my family there on Western Australia. And, the virus hit and I was talking to people back in China. At first, I think I saw a little headline about the Wuhan virus and wasn't a big deal yet. And I don't think people outside of China were really even talking about it much. But then by the time I was starting ready to leave Australia, the virus was kicking off and it was getting really bad in Wuhan, I think. And I had to make the decision do I go back to China? Should I go back to Canada? My relatives in Australia are totally cool if I stay here, but I don't know how long my welcome is for. And also if I don't go back to my job, I'm just going to lose it, right? So it's a really hard decision for me. And I ultimately ended up, flying back to China while the virus was sort of ramping up. And it was funny because literally everybody was just telling me not to do that. The Australian relatives were I don't know, Niko, it's China. You're probably better off, camping out here for a while. I was no, it's, and then my family also too. I understand why they were worried. Because last time with SARS, it didn't leave China, I went back to China. Even the Singapore Airlines attendant was are you sure? Most of the people on that flight were just Chinese people returning from their holidays.
Sure.
And so but it actually, it turned out to be probably for the best because the virus situation here was quite under control after a few months of just sort of staying inside. And I was working all last year. I was teaching classes. And it's only recently that China had a little bit of an outbreak, ironically, from Nanjing. So Nanjing's kind of in hot water as far as the central government goes right now.
So what was it like to be under lockdown in China? I guess that was what, when you first got there, I guess you had to, was it in Nanjing, were you just staying at home the whole time? Or was there, what was it like to, was it affecting Jiangsu too as well, or?
Oh yeah, it was I think there were cases, because the Wuhan thing, obviously they were a little slow in getting a cap on it. So
Sure.
There were cases in Nanjing, and when I got to the airport, it was a ghost town, getting temperature scanned everywhere, and everyone was basically told okay, we're not going back to school after the holidays, and everybody should just stay on holiday. That was the thing. It was kind of in a way lucky that people were already on holiday, but also unlucky because people were traveling around the country. But I just came back. I stayed with my partner in our apartment. We just went outside to get groceries, and that lasted a couple months, I guess. I don't even know what the official rule is. Everyone in China has basically been following things with a pretty civic sense. Most people are yeah, okay, I'll stay inside. Okay, I'll wear masks. Like, it's not politicized in the way it is.
Mm-hmm. So, and then I guess life went back to normal after a few months, or was it like, what was the situation after that?
Yeah, I guess it went to sort of like a new normal. Back in the fall, went back to teaching classes, except there was, health protocols, and like parents weren't allowed into the school, just kids, and we're still wearing masks all the time. One big thing was everyone started using these health codes, like because WeChat and Alipay are so big here. Everyone already had these two apps on their phone, which you can use to like pull up a health code. I don't know what's going on the back end, really. I guess they're just like tracking your interactions or who you happen to pass by, but you can't pretty much enter any public place without a green QR code from your provincial health app. And that was the main thing. Like, everything was pretty normal. Like, you just wear masks, show your health code. That was the way it was for like the whole last year. They started reopening things. Like, it went back to normal way faster than, Canada is still not even back to normal.
Yeah.
I remember at first, like, I went from my Australian vacation to lockdown in China, and I had a friend teaching English in Spain, and he was like, "Hey, I'm on the balcony, man, hanging out, drinking some brews. No lockdown in Spain." It was just he gloated way too soon because he was like, he had to leave Spain because of the virus, and then like the lockdown in Canada lasts, I guess, way longer. I mean, I guess there's been like 4 or 5 waves there in southern Ontario, at least, right?
Yeah, we're entering basically a 4th wave, although about 80% of people have had one vaccine at least. So we don't know how bad it's going to be, but we'll see. But so I mean, were things like movie theaters open and venues and stuff, or?
Yeah, movie theaters did reopen after a while. Malls were open, restaurants, parks. I guess like certain things didn't go on. Like, there wasn't any concerts at the concert hall because no one's flying into China, or like sports events were all canceled. But like within China, the virus was like pretty well under control, and especially in Jiangsu province. So everything was like basically normal except you're wearing a mask.
Sure. And so what's happened more recently with you? Like, what's the status of your lockdown and stuff now? Is there anything new other than the codes and whatnot, or?
I guess it's just, they did this thing where everyone in the whole city got nucleic acid tested like 5 times.
Oh, wow.
Because Nanjing had this outbreak from the airport. A Russian plane had not been disinfected, or the cleaning crew had, a few people got infected on a cleaning crew, went back to their neighborhood. It's kind of been a big thing in the news here because, like, this one lady went to another town, even though her health code was yellow. She, like, cheated. It's very easy to cheat. Like, you just take a screenshot of somebody else's green code, and most security guards are not, like, reading the fine print of your health code. So she went to play mahjong in this, like, crowded mahjong den and ended up, like, cheating. And, the police caught her, and she's been on, like, TikTok videos and, like, doing her perp walk in her hazmat suit.
Wow.
So she's sort of like a public enemy now for, obviously, like, doing a pretty selfish thing. But yeah, it's crazy. Like, there was a sort of almost a grassroots thing, like block captains and every community arranged its own testing base. And like, so in my community, I walked to like the office tower nearby, and like 5 times now had to go and do like a throat swab. And apparently everyone in the city has done that now, just trying to track. And it's apparently worked. Like, the new cases in Nanjing are like in the single digits, I think, every day, or sometimes there's 0.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, it's quite different still here in terms of that. Like, although it is kind of a bit funny, like, as you said, it's much more politicized. So there's stuff like in Alberta, they were originally going to stop doing testing of asymptomatic people and stuff like that. Like, just really, like, the testing has never been that widespread here. So that's pretty, it's pretty amazing. I don't know, just the as you said, that civic nature to it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I mean, it's obviously just been very fortunate for me because my life hasn't been so heavily impacted, and I've felt safe. Like, I haven't even gotten the Sinopharm vaccine yet because my partner doesn't really want to, and I don't know, just it also hasn't been urgent. I think if I'd been in Toronto, I probably would be vaccinated by now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I feel for my family and friends in Toronto though. Like I can even see certain friends lining up on like the more like science is awesome side, and certain friends lining up on the sort of like this is like oppressive, the government's like restrictions. It's just like, I don't know, China's at like a really peak of national sentiment right now because of the virus management in part. Like people are super proud of China's response, and like America's embarrassing response also makes them really proud that China's done so well. So it's been funny to be here through this.
Has I mean, I don't know how closely you've been following what it's the situation in the West, but one thing that we've been dealing with is like the CDC will keep kind of changing their messaging and their guidance over time, and the politicization of it really doesn't help things a lot. Like it seems like they're really focused on like, okay, what do we need to tell people regardless of how true it is, just to make them do what we want them to do. And so like masks at first, it was like, don't get masks, we need them for hospitals. And then it was like, everyone should wear a mask. And it was like, wear 2 masks. And the stuff with the vaccines has kind of been back and forth about like how effective they are and all this kind of stuff. Has that been the case in China too? Has there been changing guidance at all? And how has that, if so, how has that worked, Yeah,
I wish I could give a better characterization of that because my Chinese is still not very good. Obviously, like a government missive is going to be over my head.
Sure.
One thing that's been interesting is the structure of the government is like this top-down thing where you have the central government and the provincial and the cities. And in a way, it's also been a little bit scattered because, the provinces are empowered to do their own thing and the cities are also empowered to do their own thing. But like the central government early on actually had to say like, okay, like we're setting a national guideline for certain protocols and travel restrictions and health measures, right? And we don't want provinces and cities trying to outdo that, to go even stricter because, it's kind of like you don't want to be the weakest link or else like what's happening to Nanjing right now. It's, the officials of the city are like embarrassed. People are losing their jobs like because, the central government has a delegation sent to the city right now to like find out how did this happen. Like you guys basically started another outbreak in China. So like the tendency was for the lower levels to go even harder than the like national government was actually recommending. And the national government actually had to say, no, like take it easy with some of these restrictions. So it's kind of been uneven here in the sense that for a while people were trying to outdo each other with how serious the lockdown and the measures were.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I don't really know much about the whole situation in China regarding like the central government versus the city governments and the province governments and all that. That's I don't know, kind of an interesting thing I haven't really thought much about. Is that worth looking at? Like, is there a lot to?
I'd like to learn more about it. It's like because it's got its roots in the revolution, it has these structures that don't like parallel Western ones sometimes. Like, a lot of Western, like, the parliamentary form ultimately comes from France and different like legal precedents. I mean, I don't really know much about this stuff, but it just seems to me like China has these systems that on the one hand, they evolve from like ancient Chinese things like the hukou, the household registration is very old, but like it's obviously was reworked when the Communist Party came into power. Yeah, it's interesting. I wish I could tell you more about that.
So do you feel like there's any possibility that like this new like is there actually like a wave there now, or are you talking about a very small number of cases nationwide? Like,
it's very small nationwide.
Okay.
Like I think it's still a few hundred, and there's like 1.4 billion people here, right?
Sure.
So it's they really tried to put a cap on it early, and I think it's working
Sure.
because the virus at first caught them off guard, but for the whole time now, people have been preparing. So
Sure.
like I don't know where they were keeping these like 40 million tests. Like maybe they don't even have 40 million. I don't know. But like I definitely showed up 5 times to get my throat swabbed,
Sure.
which was impressive.
Yeah.
They had like teenagers volunteering to put on the because it's like the hot summer here. So, but it's kind of a point of civic pride that like people are like, yeah, like we're gonna fight this virus together. Like, look at the Western countries shitting their pants about this.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And how has teaching been during it?
Teaching's been pretty normal. Kids wear masks. I didn't have to wear a mask while teaching. It would have been very awkward to try and teach language through a mask.
Sure.
Yeah.
And at first there were like little restrictions, like, okay, we're all going to eat in a different way now. But eventually it was like just purely normal.
Yeah. So you said that you wanted to talk maybe a bit about language learning as well. So you've been trying, are you trying to learn Chinese or?
I am.
Okay.
I've been studying Chinese. Like I took a course at uni, and then since getting here, I've been studying. I listened to that episode you guys did with Goatstein. He mentioned Anki. Anki's great for learning characters. Kind of like hitting that intermediate swing right now, which is kind of like a plateau, trying to power through that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Don, you said you're doing some Chinese study yourself?
Well, just a little bit. I was just working on it a bit on like Duolingo and stuff, just learning some of the basic characters and stuff. But I mean, I've had failed attempts before at various times to get into Chinese, but especially, I mean, when I was there, I picked up a bit from, like enough to enter pinyin in my little phone, whatever, so I could get a taxi ride somewhere or something like that, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So when you're out and about, do you try to speak Chinese to like, like people that you're around, like clerks and things like this, or?
Oh yeah. I'm not a social butterfly, but like when I do my errands, I'm going out, I chat with people. Sometimes people actually like come up to me on rare occasions, or it does sometimes get annoying. Like a little kid will just be like staring at me on the bus.
Sure.
Or even I was at the park the other day, I think this kid might have had like some developmental disabilities. He was like stroking the hair on my forearms.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, no, like I use Chinese when out and about. At first it was very hard, but now I sort of can hack through like simple exchanges and stuff.
Okay.
And
yeah, that's cool.
Getting slowly better.
Yeah. Is there a lot of English there now, or is that part of it? Or when I was there was very, very little. That was like, and very few foreigners, and relatively.
Yeah, I think things change fast, and there is a fair bit of English here. Like every student is trying to learn English, particularly for the university entrance exam, and there are, especially in the cities, people who are more like sort of cosmopolitan, like the rich will have like probably more experience leaving China. And yeah, there's a fair bit of English here. Most people don't know any though. And some of the people who have supposedly like studied to a high level, it's like they sort of, I mean, I guess the fundamental problem is Chinese and English are just like so far apart on the family tree of languages that like sort of coming from Chinese to English or English to Chinese, like anybody's going to have to do a lot of work.
Sure.
Like I'd say it's like triple as hard as learning Spanish or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when Chinese people try and learn it, it's the same as when we try and learn Chinese. Like people will, it's a marathon, and people will drop out in smaller and smaller waves. Like some people never get past cat and dog, and then some people end up like, okay, well, I may be able to crack Harry Potter now.
Mm-hmm. Does your partner speak Chinese or no?
Yeah, she's from Hubei, and she grew up speaking like a local dialect, but speaks Mandarin, obviously, and yeah, also fairly good at English. Like she was a crack student as a kid, and learned a lot of English just for like school, because it's like one of the big subjects in the Gaokao, which is the university entrance exam. So anybody who wants to go to university pretty much has to study some English.
Okay. Yeah.
Are you able to get around with English okay over there, or do most people just not speak any English?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of cab drivers or Uber drivers, Didi drivers will know a bit. There are a lot of other foreigners here who don't speak any Chinese, and somehow they make it work. it's interesting. I mean, the expat crowd here, there's obviously some people who are really interested in Chinese culture and learning the language, and there's other people who are like, it's basically mercenary, like, they'll go to whatever country pays the most for teaching English, and China happens to be one of those right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know a guy who owns like a restaurant here. He's been here for 10 years. He's got a wife, and she's Chinese, and my Chinese like surpassed his like the first month I got here.
Yeah, that's funny. How do you find like interacting with the bureaucracy there in general? Like,
oh God,
getting all your forms and everything, and
it's a nightmare. I mean, like, Chinese bureaucracy's got to be one of the biggies. Even before coming here, getting the visa and stuff, it was like running around and like I took an overnight Greyhound to get this stamp from Ottawa, and then came back to Toronto, and the Chinese consul was like, "Oh no, this won't do. You need a stamp from Toronto." And I was like, "God damn it!"
Yeah.
But then recently here, it's been kind of messy because my like employer is trying to like. First, they were trying to like make me stay because I found a better job. And then now they didn't pay me my last paycheck. Be interesting to talk about like education with you guys. I don't know if you heard about the government crackdown on private tutoring in China, and like the video game crackdown too.
Oh, I haven't heard of that. No.
I haven't heard of the video game. I knew about the tutor schools, right, or something like that. They're made in
the tutor schools. So I guess this is like a constellation of things, like central government initiatives. What about the I get like the tech sector is getting reined in, and then they basically banned a lot of private tutoring. Like, you can't, for example, tutor from abroad. Like, there's this big company called VIP Kid, which is like, you hire an American to sit in front of a webcam and do an English lesson with a kid sitting in China. Like, that's not allowed anymore. Everybody who teaches has to be in China. And they also, like, because, like, kids here are studying so hard. Like, from even like 4 or 5, they've got like extracurricular lessons, and like the point of the stuff is the government wants to reduce their workload, and also I guess people see it as it's too hyper competitive. It's like if everybody in the movie theater is standing up, then you have to stand up too. So I guess the point is to try and sort of like have kids have more time to play but I don't know if it's sort of, you're attacking the symptoms. Like, the society is still extremely competitive. Like, just because you ban tutoring doesn't mean the kids aren't still trying to compete for the same number of like middle class jobs in China.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So what was with the video games? I haven't heard about this. So.
Oh, that was funny because like I think Xi Jinping made a speech about tightening up. Kids before were only allowed to play like 2 hours of video games a day, and now they're only allowed to play one, like through like the digital sort of nanny apps. And yeah, they were like, he called it an opiate of the people, like in a sort of a throwback to Marx and like the Opium Wars. But then I think they quickly like walked that back because it was a little too strong. Yeah, like video game cafes and like mobile games. Like there's this one like League of Legends ripoff called Honor of Kings that's huge, and just like in the West, like young people just pour hours into these matches, and I don't know. It's sort of like some people view it as like, okay, this is like the paternalistic, like Chinese government trying to be like a nanny to its kids. On the other hand, like I do think actually like in my life, like video games have kind of been a poison, like which is like, I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Anything to keep those hacking fuckers off of the servers, I'm okay. Every time I see a Chinese name when I'm playing Red Orchestra 2, it's just, bad news.
I don't think any laws are going to slow like hardcore gamers down. Like if you're savvy enough in China, you know how to get on a VPN and play whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, it's strange I used to joke about this before because Venezuela, for a while, was banning a lot of like violent video games. That was like one of their policies, and sort of restricting certain imports of different games. And I remember there was this guy that had an article that came out about how like he lived in a tyranny basically because he was like that, like he had to import illegally from the United States or something like that. I don't know. There's some roundabout way that he ended up making it sound like he had to pay like a fifth of his wages or something like that to be able to play a video game or something. And it's like, I don't know, it just sounded so absurd that I made fun of it a lot. But I mean, since then I've gotten back into gaming a bit more, and yeah, I would be pissed off if someone was like, you can't play that game because it involves violence or something like that. Because the Call of Duty ones are pretty fun, but like, I don't know.
I mean, isn't it easy enough just to torrent a game though? Like,
Yeah, that's the thing. He was lying. That's the he was like,
yeah,
he was pretending that like he had to go through official channels or get like some sort of anyways, yeah. And an interesting thing about him was that I Googled who he was, and I found out that he posted on a Reddit forum where he would take pictures of his employees' feet. So, so anyway, so
that's what happens. You take away people's games; they start making up new ones.
Sure.
Yeah, it's an outlet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you mind talking about? You said you're going to switch jobs or something like that. Do you want to talk about that or no?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the sort of bureaucratic headache has been for me like kind of a low point here. Like, you know, when I first came here, like my life in Toronto wasn't very good. I couldn't get a nicely paying job, even though I went to university, and I was just like, you know, bummed out by, you know, walking on the Mink Mile in Toronto and being like, look at these Mercedes, look at this
Sure.
capitalist hellhole.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
and then I first came to China and I was like, oh my God, is that a hammer and sickle on that park? Can they do that?
Yeah.
You know, I was like a little bit dazzled by the fact that, you know, I'm in a communist country now, but I guess that sort of wore off because, like, you know, I'm in a building right now, like a nice apartment building, and if I go downstairs, I can find like dozens of Mercedes. There's a Rolls Royce down there. There's Maseratis. To me, like, there's this sort of global convergence of culture, and some of the things that bugged me about the way we live in Toronto and Canada are also getting to me here. You know, like I got kind of. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm very lucky to. I'm exploiting this sort of. I don't know what you would call it, like arbitrage or something. Like, there's so many Chinese youth and parents who like need their kids to learn English in order to have a good test score on university, and so the demand for teaching is insane. Which means like I got this job for teaching math next year, and I think I probably had to compete against like two or three other applicants, if that.
Sure.
Which is like, you know, even for like a restaurant job in Toronto, it's like I worked at a restaurant. My boss had an Indeed inbox of like 200 resumes. So like, yeah, like I kind of got a little bit jaded in the summer here when my previous employer was like, if you don't work with us next year, we're not going to give you the paperwork to get a new visa, and your career in China is over. And I was like, well, I'm not going to work with you now that you said that. But I just, I've been fighting them all summer, and thankfully my partner has been an angel about it, like helping me go to all these offices, and like we've been just crisscrossing the city, like talking to police and labor lawyers and, you know, immigration officials, and it's every time like it makes me panic, you know, like walking into the halls of the government, and I don't really speak Chinese. I can't really read anyone's tone. So that's been like scary, and I think it's all good now though. Like the Labor Bureau, thankfully, has been like, yeah, what your company is doing is wrong, but like we'll like get them to pay you and give your paperwork. But the problem is like most foreigners can't do that. I mean, like Crimey, it's like a tiniest violin thing because like foreigners here get paid like, you know, 5 to 10 times what the median wage is. Like, so, you know, it's a minor thing, but like it would suck to have to go back to Canada. This is my major thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When I was teaching English abroad, like in the Middle East, a lot of these ESL centers and stuff like that were really sleazy. You know, always trying to cheat the teachers and stuff. And I don't know, have you run in? It sounds like you've run into similar issues.
Yeah, like sort of like lying to the parents about what's actually the curriculum and the qualifications of their teachers. I mean, there's some real low points. It's a big country with a lot of places. Like, there was one foreign teacher who, like, every contract here pretty much has a rule that says you're not allowed to fall in love with one of your students, which is like, that should go without saying. But there was one American who murdered one of his high school girls, and because they had
I think
sort
I
of
heard about that
tryst.
story.
Yeah. So, like, I guess that's why China wants to, like, tighten up some of these rules. But on the other hand, like, the companies aren't interested in that at all. Like, there was one, like, emblematic of this is there was one education company here that they were making light bulbs, but then realized there was better margins in education, so they just dropped what they were doing in light bulbs and switched to education.
So there was something that, I mean, I can't remember exactly what you said, but there was some sort of story that you wanted to tell. Well, there was one about Paradise Lost in the Park or something like that. But
Oh yeah, that's probably like the weirdest thing that's happened to me here. It's totally random. So I just I was reading Paradise Lost in the park, you know, which that's also another thing that would be cool to talk to you guys about. But you know, sitting on this walkway and just trying to, you know, focus, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye, like, there's this streamer, and at first I think it's a phone call, but then I realized, like, okay, this is, like, you see this fairly often, like, somebody's outside live streaming, and, you know, I'm just trying to tune her out, and then she comes and, like, sits, like, right next to me, which is weird, because it's, like, this wide open park, and then eventually it's like, hey, like, can you speak Chinese? I was like, yeah, a little bit, and she's like, oh, that's cool, like the usual small talk. And I was kind of like trying to say, like, I'm not really interested, but I was a bit curious about her live stream. So I was like, oh, you're live streaming right now. That's interesting. And I was like, how many people are watching you? And she was like, oh, you know, 40,000. I was like, 40,000? Like, what? Are you like a big deal? Like, 40,000 isn't like, I mean, it's China, so like you got to sort of, 40,000, that's nothing, but still, a lot of people. I was like, why are 40,000 people watching this girl? Like, what is her deal? Like, I don't even see her doing anything interesting. Like, talking to me is not that interesting. And then she keeps chatting, and she's like, hey, like, can I get your WeChat? Or, like, she's kind of being flirty. And I'm like, no, you know, I don't know if my partner would be cool about that. And she's like, oh, no, like, you're overthinking it. And then, you know, she shows me her screen, and there's like a sticker of like a woman getting spanked, like a cartoon. It's like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get the picture here. And, you know, before long, I'm like pointedly like reading my book. I'm like, yeah, I'm not really into TikTok. I'm more into books, and just like kind of half ignoring her. And then she's like, yeah, no, it's like this is what I mean. And she just like flashes me, like lifts up her skirt. And, I see, I'm like, oh my God. So, and this is kind of like, I don't know, I feel kind of like male privilege, because I was like, at no point was I like feeling like in danger, but also I was like, man, this is not cool. Like, what if one of my kids sees this right now? My students are out of school. They're like, this is the park where they come after school. Like, that's not cool. To top it off, like, she sits down next to me on this wooden bench, and I'm like sort of frozen. I don't want to make a scene or like make this viral, so I'm trying to like engineer a way out that's not funny. And she sits down, and like before I can get away, I just start to feel like the bench going bzz, bzz, bzz. I'm like,
oh no.
It's coming through the bench, and I'm just like, okay. I stand up, and because I'm speaking in a second language, I'm like, okay, see you next time.
Yeah.
So that was the greatest thing that happened to me here. I told that to a buddy, and he was like, oh, I feel so bad for you. Like, a sex streamer came up and flashed you in the park. I was like, well, it actually wasn't that cool.
Yeah. So,
Tom,
funny. Have you ever read Paradise Lost, or no?
I have not. No.
Okay, I have not either. So, I don't know. Sorry, we're not great conversationalists.
That's
about
all
that
good. I'm just happy to ramble here. You know, it's basically a story about justifying the ways of God to man. Like, why were women never given the privilege of reading and the pain of childbirth?
Right.
But real talk, though, I have been enjoying the like theology chat that you guys have been having on the pod. Kind of cool thing about learning Chinese is made me a lot more interested in like English, and sort of been going back trying to be more literate. So I've been reading the Old Testament, going through this. Don, you said you did this open course too, right?
I did part of it, yeah. I watched some of the lectures at least, yeah.
Yeah.
The Yale ones?
Yeah, the Christine Hayes Yale Hebrew Bible course. So, like, no, it just seems like an important thing. It's at the foundation of so much other literature. It's been very hard, but like rewarding in certain ways. You know, I'm I guess an atheist. I was born Greek Orthodox. I did convert to Buddhism, and I typed out the Shahada once, but now I'm an atheist, and it's just like literature to me, and I like wisdom literature of all kinds. You know, it's
mm-hmm.
I don't know. Can I share a little interesting thing that came from the course with you guys, which is like
Sure.
So it's coming from the Jewish Study Bible, which is the Bible they use for the course, and there's a passage in Jeremiah which sort of gives an example of how, you know, because the Bible was compiled over many centuries in different sort of periods by different writers, and even within the Bible you can see examples of inter-biblical criticism. And so this example is basically in Daniel 9:2, Daniel says, I, Daniel, consulted the books concerning the number of years that according to the word of the Lord that had come to Jeremiah the prophet were to be the term of Jerusalem's desolation, 70 years. And so, you know, Daniel is calling back to Jeremiah, where Jeremiah states that, you know, Babylon's desecrated Jerusalem, and so Jeremiah says in the book of Jeremiah, thus said the Lord, when Babylon's 70 years are over, I will take note of you, and I will fulfill to you my promise to favor, to bring you back to this place. And so there's this like promise from the Lord to, you know, restore Jerusalem in 70 years. But, you know, the problem is at the time that Daniel is answering this question, it's already the Second Temple period. And so Jerusalem's in peril, I believe, again. So it doesn't make sense to say that God's promise was unfulfilled if Jerusalem is still in peril. And the craziest thing about this is the way the Bible itself actually explains this apparent contradiction, which is, you know, Daniel reports that the angel Gabriel answered this question: 70 weeks have been decreed for your people, and your holy city until eternal righteousness is ushered in. So the actual interpretation of the Hebrew here is that 70 weeks basically means 70 times 7, because you're meant to read the consonants in the original Jeremiah text twice. Like Shivim, Shavuim, Shivin would mean 77. If you read it one time, it only means 70 years. But if you read it twice, it means, you know, 70 times 7. And so the ramification of this is that the word of God is not like the word of a human. Divine speech is infinitely more meaningful. When a human utters the consonants of the words Shivim, it means only one thing, 70. But when God does so, they have at least another layer of meaning. And thus they can be read twice in two different ways. Shavuim Shivim to mean 77s. So I just thought that blew my mind. You know, like, if you can read any consonants in the Bible 2 times when they're printed once, like, what does that open up for interpretation?
Yeah, I'd never heard of that before. That's interesting.
Yeah, so, I mean, the one thing I started doing that course, the one thing it irritated me a bit, and was just the sort of regional comparison stuff that happens a lot in those courses kind of thing, or it's like talking about the tropes kind of thing, you know, being like, you know, there's this
like the
trope
ancient Near East, like
commonalities and all that kind of thing, like between different faiths and stuff. And I don't know, for some reason that always kind of throws me off a bit, because it's like, I don't know, it just, it makes it sound like, I don't know, it feels like trivial or something like that at that point. I don't know. Just,
you mean,
you know,
like
I don't
the
know.
stuff about, you know, the Babylonian flood story mirroring the Noah flood story?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I like that, but sometimes maybe it's like an inheritance from when I was an atheist, being, because I was so convinced by it then that now it feels like, now it feels like it makes it, maybe I'm cringing at myself kind of thing.
Yeah,
in the
I
past.
know what you mean.
But I don't know. So that's why I ended up.
I used to think that in this very sort of new atheist type way, like, oh, we can understand the prohibitions on eating pork as like, the priests were like the scientists of the day, and they basically knew that pork was unhealthy. And it's just like, that's like such a shallow and
that kind of explanation for pork stuff like triggers me like nothing else. I really hate it when people go that route.
Yeah. Like, it's really just a cop-out. It's taking the easy way out. Like, you could do the hard work of like trying to read something closely and understand its interconnections, and it's also just arrogant because like you're assuming like, so everyone else who was alive at that time except the priest was just stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problems with that specific idea. Like, why only the Abrahamic religions? Like, why is that the place where we see this prohibition on pork, right? I mean, I guess you can exclude Christianity there, but I don't know. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, if it's something that would develop naturally, that people would come to find that eating pork has certain kind of medical problems or something with the lack of, the technology we have today, refrigeration and all that, then you would see that cropping up all over the place with all kinds of different explanations and stuff. But for some reason, it's like only this one kind of tradition, and it just the one that kind of makes a little bit more sense to me is the idea of like in-group out-group sort of identification and stuff. A lot of things in Islam are pretty explicitly about that, and were even changed because they were like too similar to certain Jewish practices. So like when Muslims pray, there's various positions. You stand, and then you bow, and then you stand back up, and then you prostrate. In the bowing, it was made kind of a point that you should keep a straight back, so you're almost making like a 90-degree kind of bend, because in Jewish prayer they do a similar sort of movement, but they will kind of like curve their backs a little bit more. So to kind of like distinguish the prayers, the prophet said to like keep your back straight. So that's now like a thing you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think those kind of in-group things, they do appear in the Hebrew Bible as well. And that, but like you can't, like you said, like you can't. It's very unsatisfying. Like it's, to contrast with this sort of the pig pork explanation is one thing that I learned from this course about the and maybe like Don, I think this is where a little bit you are really just cringing too much at yourself here, because one of the things that the Hebrew, I guess this is Deuteronomy, like innovates is these sanctuary cities. It spends a lot of time talking about like these like 6 cities where if you murder someone by accident, aka manslaughter, like you're allowed to go to this city. Nobody can seek vengeance on you there until the high priest of Israel changes. A new priest comes in. So there's like a jubilee for manslaughterers, which you have to put that against the Near East and the other laws. And like manslaughter is basically a new idea, like the Hittite laws and the Code of Hammurabi. Like if you murder someone, the penalty is death. Like somebody else can take their vengeance on you.
Yeah, eye for an eye, right?
It's eye for an eye, and it doesn't take into account like the language that the Hebrew Bible actually uses. Like is if you are swinging a hammer and you should let it go and it hits someone and it kills them, like it's considered manslaughter, and you can go to a refuge city and like wait out the other family to like cool down, and then you're it's not a crime anymore, because like really your heart wasn't murder. It was just a freak accident. Whereas in the other societies in the ancient Near East, like if that happened to you, like it would just be totally legal for someone to execute you or take vengeance on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting development. Yeah. I had a question for you about to get back to China a bit is so I guess you're going to be there during the Olympics?
Yeah. Well, the Olympics just happened, and I got to watch a few of the Chinese feeds. It was interesting to see, like, Don, I know you've been thinking about medal counts. Like, the whole time, China was doing like, okay, we're going to count gold medals, and because we're in the lead of gold medals, and America's in the lead of total medals. So, you see the same sort of thing going on in every country, and like obviously the announcers are like, okay, here comes Canada. All right, that was good, and then they're like, all right, the Chinese sprinter is here.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a medal table where they included Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Macau as in their medal counts for the golds for China. So
that's insane.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, but so I guess because Beijing is next year, right? So that'll be
right. The
interesting
Winter
to see.
Olympics.
So,
yeah. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I mean, China just like, first it had its 70th anniversary of the country in 2019. And then it had, this year it had the 100th anniversary of the party, which was like an insane, like, propaganda blitz, by the way. Like, it's tough to talk about Chinese politics because, like, I'm trying to be a little more nuanced about these things and, not be a cheerleader any one way or the other and just try and be fair and honest about it. But like, it's been like a propaganda blitz. Like, every major avenue has this big red 100 for like 100 years of the party, which I guess like is kind of weird, right? Because I do believe that like capitalism restored in China during the reform and opening up period. But at the same time, like they were not able to do away with the iconography and the ideology of the revolution and the country's like founding mythology. So, like I went to Mao's mausoleum in Beijing early on when I got here, and it was kind of touching to see there were women there like in tears and people like moved to tears by the sight of Mao Zedong's lying in state. Because he still is a hero to people, and like I guess the Xi Jinping government has sort of like allowed a bit more of that sort of throwback Maoism to sort of come about.
So where other places have you been other than Nanjing and Beijing?
I went to Shanghai for a bit, Beijing, and then I did during last year's Spring Festival. I guess I was sort of cheating. Like they were saying, we encourage people not to travel, but I was like, man, I kind of want to see more China. So I went to the southwest. I went to Yunnan, and went to see a few places there, which is just beautiful. Like
so for people that know, it's like a southern area. It's more like would the word be jungle? Like it's like a lot of it is like tropical, isn't it? Like it's like or something like that. It's like very,
I think there's like
forested?
the high plain, and there's also the like lowland jungles. The southwest, like Sichuan, has jungle, and I'm not like too great on the geography, but I think it's like abutting against India and Nepal, like the southwestern China. So it's cool. They've got, there's this really cool high plain lake there in this town called Dali. They've got a great giant inland lake there, and it's just gorgeous, and it's a little less like living in a big Chinese city. It's like very, very developed, and I don't mean to be like the classic like, oh, it's cool to see the real China, see the villages, but it is nice to get out of, because like I'm kind of in an expat bubble and also like a rich bubble as far as my neighbors here.
No, I can understand that. Yeah.
So what, like, did you see any like wild animals or anything like that kind of thing while you're out there too, or like that kind of tourism, or no?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most striking things about even coming here was just like every bird and bush and tree is just like totally different, and that is one of the first culture shocks for me, like being in 12 hours away, another hemisphere. But unfortunately, Yunnan, I did see some pretty depressing, like, Simpsons episode zoos where, like, there's just, like, monkeys with people throwing noodles at them. But, unfortunately, no, like, real wildlife. There's been that sort of elephant troop traipsing
Oh,
around
right.
southwestern China. That's kind of cute.
Cool. So do you have like a sort of like a plan that you're kind of, I mean, it sounds like you went there without much of a long-term plan, kind of just seeing how things went. Do you feel like you're sort of settling in? Do you feel like you want to live there over the long term, or is it still kind of like a, see where it goes over the next few years kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I would like to stay here. I think it would be awesome to really be fluent in Chinese and like maybe long-term translate Chinese fiction. So that takes a long time. But also in general, like it might be cool to go to school here again. I kind of miss being a student, and being an English teacher here, it's a bit shameful, honestly, because it just feels like you're not really making much of a dent, and you're getting overpaid for it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, hopefully, I'm in a great relationship and hope to be here for a while. The kind of spanner in the works, though, is it's like I'll never really be a Chinese citizen.
Sure.
And I'll always have to deal with like these visas and the government and stuff. But maybe ultimately that is a better bargain than trying to find a new career path in Canada or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, your partner is Chinese, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's
Like,
from Hubei province.
right. So, I mean, I don't want to presume or anything, but like assuming, like, let's say you guys end up getting married at some point, would that allow you the possibility of Chinese citizenship?
Yeah, it would allow me permanent residency if we were married for 5 years, and I spent the majority of those years in China. And also any children we had would be Chinese citizens. So, and then if I had a Chinese child, then like I would always be allowed to get like a family visa for staying here. Even with a Chinese spouse, you're allowed to get a family visa. But like if you can't work, it can kind of make things difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any other? You had a few stories that you said you wanted to make sure that you got through. Did you get the? Were there any other ones that you wanted to sort of make sure that you got through, or no?
Yeah, I didn't want to go the whole podcast without taking a stab at my fellow expats. They recently got a Canadian on death row here for smuggling meth. So the story is this guy was like going to take 220 kilos of meth from a warehouse in China to Australia, and he was a Canadian citizen. They busted him and gave him 15 years in jail, and then it became this diplomatic thing, right? Because, I mean, I suppose China's probably escalating it. There's no way of telling if they're really being harsher on this guy, but like, it's not as if like it's a frame-up. So he appealed to a higher court, and then, I mean, I shouldn't be laughing. I don't know what I think about the death penalty, but he got the death penalty. First he had 15 years, appealed it, and got the death penalty. And now Canada's like, no, this is BS, which is like rightfully so. I guess like Canada should try and always be in court for its citizens. But on the other hand, it's like, the other guys they were talking about were like obviously spies. And they have these other two Canadians who are in prison for espionage. And it's just like, well, I mean, I believe that just from like the way they put up the story. And yeah, so like that guy's on death row for doing drugs. You cannot do drugs here without getting caught. And every time someone does get caught, like the foreign media picks it up as like, Chinese crackdown, which, to a certain extent, like it's a little bit hardcore about drugs here. Like I knew a guy in Nanjing who was in jail for a year for smoking weed, and I believe he was Australian. And he got a year for weed. So the Australian press, like the right-wing press, was like, this great Australian boy, he's in Chinese jails for doing nothing at all, and he's a lovely lad. And it's just like, I mean, he was like just like a hooligan. He was just like drinking and doing weed when he was in China. And, the foreign press makes him up to be like a poster boy.
Sure.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess it has become like a big story in Canada still. Like the papers are pretty, I don't know, freaking out about it. All the Michaels, they call them, I guess, the Michaels.
Yeah, they're all named Michael.
Yeah,
Oh,
so,
really?
yeah.
That's how I knew they were spies.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's a
Well, you gotta put it in context with China's doing it in retaliation for the Meng Wanzhou arrest,
Sure.
like the CFO of Huawei, which is like the big Chinese phone company, tech company. She's like no wretched of the earth. She's the daughter of the founder and the CFO of this giant company. And I guess Canada arrested her on behalf of the U.S.
Yeah.
and over like tech espionage, like or trading with Iran or something. Oh yeah, it was like some sort of tech thing with Iran, like letting Iran learn something. But yeah, so it's sort of a tit for tat thing. It's like both countries are doing the same thing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I could see this being a case of like you take all these different opportunities and like you just value them as high as you can. So like if you have someone caught for drug smuggling or whatever, then yeah, give them the death penalty. That makes it a more valuable bargaining chip. And then at the end, like they'll kind of make their trade or whatever, and decide like, okay, how do we want to settle this,
Yeah, that makes sense. It actually every time I mention I'm Canadian, like most like sort of informed people here will be like, oh, so like they'll maybe bring up Meng Wanzhou, and it's kind of put a damper. Like Chinese people used to like love Canadians because of Norman Bethune, the doctor in the Revolution, and this comedian Da Shan, who was like a Canadian who mastered Chinese and like was in comedies here. So like before putting Meng Wanzhou in jail, like relationship between Canada and China was great, but that's sort of like the sticking in the craw now.
One thing I was going to ask about the sort of pandemic stuff is I've seen that like certain kind of theories about the United States and the virus have gone viral. I mean, sorry. have become popular in China in terms of like a petition about like researching the links between the American government and the virus and stuff like that, as almost kind of like a reversal of the because in the West, I mean, it's been promoted by some people that obviously the lab leak theory in terms of that somehow Wuhan was responsible for the leak and but I guess like I've seen a lot of people saying that like the Chinese netizens, whatever, millions of them signed some petition about the lab leak theory for the United States. So
yeah, I mean,
well, they're both right. It was a joint base. So
yeah, that's the Illuminati, and that's kind of no, but like I'm not surprised. I don't really read the Chinese like Twitter or Chinese social media, but like it's kind of like the West where you'll find people making every take, and it's just some of them happen to be like a bigger one than others. Like I think, yeah, look at the Olympics. I do know that some of the more like I guess right-wing Chinese were like criticizing every athlete who got silver and like sending them like mean messages, and like there's some rabidly nationalistic people here, but like it's a huge country, so that's not the majority, and there's people making different takes about it.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up before we sort of, I guess, wrap up soon?
Oh yeah, I was wondering if you guys had heard about this. Probably didn't make the news over there, but like Arca shoe buying thing, or the Adidas and Nike sort of controversies over Xinjiang cotton.
Oh yeah, I mean I've only heard very very little bit about it, but yeah, like
it's like the basically like the internal Chinese media is obviously just like, oh yeah, like look, like Xinjiang, we're lifting it out of poverty, like our cultural heritage is so great and varied. Like meanwhile, like okay, how come the Han people get to wear suits, but everybody else is wearing like traditional garb. So like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to be too, like I said, like fall too hard on one side or the other here. Like obviously, like what's happening in Xinjiang, it's like it's hard to know. There's a lot of like propaganda flying around from both sides. Obviously, it's a form of like chauvinism, and like I don't think Islam is really being respected in Xinjiang. But like because of the international controversy, I think Adidas and Nike both said they would stop using Xinjiang sourced cotton because in theory the cotton workers and the people tailoring the clothes were oppressed Uyghurs. And you know, these companies are obviously just, you know, they're not doing this out of the good of their heart. It's just a PR thing. But like,
Sure, yeah.
There was a huge boycott in China about this. Like, their sales in China plummeted, and you know, still like there were athletes in the Chinese Olympics who were wearing Adidas or Nike, or there was this one shooter who had like a whole closet full of sneakers because he's like a sneakerhead, and she had a bunch of Nikes. And certain parts of the Chinese internet were like, "You traitor! How dare you buy Nike?"
Wow.
And then the reverse thing happened where this one shoe company in China, which was like, it was cool in the 90s, but like ever since then, people are like, no, like we don't want Chinese shoes, we want foreign shoes. So Adidas and Nike were big until this Xinjiang thing. And then this one Arke company, they donated like a huge amount of money to the floods in Hunan. And, you know, it went viral, and people in China like bought out every single Arke shoe in support of this CEO who was donating to the floods, which is just like, I feel like this is kind of the same kind of thing that happens in the West, where people are like, oh wow, like that's amazing what Bill Gates is doing with all his money, and this kind of, I don't like this respect for philanthropists.
Yeah, I get
Sure.
what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of like consumer stuff like that, like in the United States and Canada with like Chick-fil-A and Starbucks and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I wonder what like the effectiveness of some of those are. Like I know at least the Adidas one like really did like cut the sales here, and the Arke thing, they really did like sell out the whole stock. But I wonder what those American ones, like how effective they are.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it sounds like Nike's getting it from both sides because they ran. I don't know if they actually got like their sales were hurt by this, but when Colin Kaepernick was the big thing in the news,
Right.
that became like a big political issue. You know, like there was a lot of people calling for boycotts, kind of on that Blue Lives Matter side of thing, and then the other side is more, you know, trying to support Nike for that kind of stuff. So
I guess they sort of wash out. I mean, the American situation is so fragmented. I don't think any of these things really gather steam as far as like consumer boycotts and boycotts, and but I think in China, because like the country really is very unified right now around all these recent events, and like it was huge when this Arke thing happened. Like I don't know. I guess this is what I mean by like global culture converging, because like Chinese consumer class is rather young and growing, but then you see some of the same ills that we've long been dealing with in, you know, Canada and America with our fat middle classes of just like, you know, I interact with the world as a consumer. I exert leverage over the world as a consumer, and like it's just, I don't know, it's not great to see people in China falling for that as well. Like I don't know what it does. Like, okay, so you encourage more companies to be philanthropic, hoping that they go viral, but like ultimately, like if there are floods happening on the planet, we need a global solution to it, not one where just like, okay, if one country has generous rich people, then they're going to be all right.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, it was wonderful to have you on. I really enjoyed our conversation, Niko.
Yeah, me too.
And
Thanks so much.
I'm really glad you were able to join us. I know it's well, I guess it's early morning there, 12-hour difference from where I am. So
yeah, I think you win the official you know, time zone difference for You Can't Win guests so far.
Yeah.
All right. Can't be topped.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It was a blast.
So if you guys enjoyed this episode of You Can't Win and you'd like a second episode every week, you can get that by subscribing to our Patreon, where you'll get access to that as well as access to our Discord, where you can talk to us in our lovely community. If you want to send us anonymous questions that we usually answer at the end of episodes, you can do that by going to our Twitter account at YouCan'tWinPod, and you'll find a link to the Curious Cat pin there. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye.